Meghan and Harry's secret plan to take down the royal family is getting finally exposed. Because behind the palaces, the interviews, and the perfectly curated silence, something far darker has been unfolding. And this time, it's not just Prince Harry caught in the storm, it's Meghan too. For months, the public believed things had quieted down. No Netflix bombs, no explosive interviews with Oprah or emotional podcast confessions. But that wasn't peace, it was strategy, because the silence was never about stepping back. It was the setup, the calm before the collapse. And now, the full picture is coming into focus. Private communications, quiet moves behind palace doors, a new wave of calculated PR maneuvers overseas. Everything points to one chilling reality. Meghan and Harry may have been orchestrating something far more destructive than a simple royal feud.
Yeah, good decisions, but he still hasn't decided what he's going to do at the coronation.
So you just think this is delay?
Well, I mean, it's nearly 5 weeks, just 5 weeks before. I mean, I had a piece in The Sun saying, you know, it's either a visionary king or a caretaker king.
A full-blown takedown. This wasn't about leaving. It was about weakening the very institution they once begged to be part of. And the worst part? The plan may have started long before the world even knew something was wrong. Because while the royal family held back in silence, Harry and Meghan were writing a script of betrayal, page by page, leak by leak. And now, that script is starting to unravel. But to understand just how deep it goes, you have to go back to where the damage began. Because the Netflix deal? That was just the opening shot. Meghan never wanted to disappear into royal tradition. She wanted to transcend it. From the very beginning, her goals were never limited to duchess titles or balcony appearances. She had something bigger in mind, something far beyond the gates of Buckingham Palace. Power, influence, a global platform that didn't answer to protocol.
He really has to make up his mind, the image he wants to project. But Harry's position in England is really quite bizarre. I mean, here he comes. He's involved in 3 cases.
Before she ever met Harry, Meghan had already begun aligning herself with political voices, social causes, and media networks. And once she entered the royal family, that momentum didn't slow. It accelerated. Marriage wasn't a finish line, it was a launch pad. Her connections with U.S. political figures deepened. Donations were made. Private meetings happened behind closed doors. And while she publicly claimed to be stepping back for peace, she was building something entirely her own. The royal brand was just a stepping stone. Royal conflict? A convenient story arc. Every fallout, every controversy, every feud with palace aides was spun into an opportunity. Victimhood was marketable, outrage was profitable. And the bigger the royal scandal, the more global her name became. Talk of a political run didn't come from nowhere. Meghan was laying the groundwork long before anyone noticed. Advocacy campaigns, carefully worded statements, strategic media appearances, not to serve the crown, but to elevate herself beyond it. And Harry? He wasn't the mastermind. He was the access point. The key that unlocked a level of global influence Meghan could never have reached alone.
At the moment in London. First against the government on protection, then against Mirror Group newspapers on hacking, and then this case against the Daily Mail Associated newspapers is really quite bizarre because he clearly was enticed to believe that he could fight this case because they had evidence.
By the time the palace realized what was happening, it was already too late. Meghan wasn't looking to reform the monarchy, she was using it as leverage, as currency, as the foundation for her next move. And while she built her empire, Harry worked from the other side, pushing for a backdoor deal to return on his own terms. Not to repair anything, but to reclaim status without the rules. That plan, the half-in, half-out offer, wasn't naive. It was a calculated trap. When Harry and Meghan pitched their so-called half-in, half-out model, they knew exactly what they were doing. On the surface, it sounded like a compromise. One foot in royal duty, the other in Hollywood freedom. But inside the palace, the message was clear. They wanted all the benefits with none of the obligations. They weren't asking for flexibility. They were issuing a challenge. Let us monetize the crown or we'll do it anyway. And they did. The royal family understood the danger instantly. If Harry and Meghan were allowed to operate under the royal banner while cashing in through Netflix, podcasts, and product deals, it would set a precedent that could unravel the institution entirely. The monarchy would no longer be about duty. It would become a brand. But for Meghan and Harry, that was the point. They weren't interested in preserving tradition. They were interested in using it. The royal image gave their ventures global legitimacy. It opened doors in Hollywood that would have otherwise stayed shut.
The Mail hadn't only hacked into messages, but had tapped phones, broken into homes, had actually done the most extraordinary criminal things. And Harry said at one stage in the last day that there was a conspiracy that royals had to stay quiet. They weren't allowed to get involved.
And more importantly, it positioned them as victims of an outdated system. Outsiders who dared to modernize the monarchy and were punished for it. That story sold. But it was built on pressure. The half-in request wasn't meant to be accepted. It was bait. A way to frame the palace as rigid and heartless when they inevitably said no. And when the answer came, Meghan and Harry didn't pause. They activated. Within weeks, they filed legal papers, announced new business ventures, teased content that would later explode into full-blown royal exposés. They had their excuse, and they ran with it. The firm was playing chess, but Meghan and Harry weren't playing by the same rules. They weren't trying to win back favor. They were building a different board entirely. And from that moment forward, nothing was off limits. Not private conversations, not family grief, not even the Queen's final days. Once the bridge was burned, the gloves came off. Suddenly, conversations that were meant to stay behind palace walls started leaking into the media. Stories that only a few people could have known. Stories involving private arguments, strained relationships, even personal health matters.
And he particularly shouldn't get involved with the hacking stories. Well, it seems that that rule was quite good, because the Mail having come out now with the Harry's lawyers' key evidence is a man called Gavin Burrows, a private investigator who allegedly admitted doing all these terrible things against Harry, Elton John, Liz Hurley, the lot of them.
Began showing up in memoirs, interviews, and scripted documentaries, but none of it happened by accident. Every leak, every anonymous source, every perfectly timed accusation served the same purpose: destroy trust in the monarchy, one quote at a time, and all roads led back to the same two people, Harry and Meghan. The targets weren't random either: William, Camilla, Charles. Each one taken down a notch in the court of public opinion, all while Harry and Meghan sat on designer couches and told the world how broken the system was. And behind the sympathetic tone, there was something colder: control. Meghan had mastered the art of delivering pain with a smile. She knew what would make headlines. She knew what would trend. And Harry? He followed suit, offering just enough vulnerability to make himself seem genuine, while still twisting the knife with every memory he shared. Then came the book, Spare. And suddenly, the leaks weren't anonymous anymore. Harry named names, described fights, painted his own brother as violent, his stepmother as manipulative, and his father as emotionally absent.
Well, the Mail now produced a statement by Burrows saying he did nothing, he's innocent, he's done that. So it seems that Harry has got himself involved in a bean feast, a rotten one.
He tore down every figure the monarchy had tried to protect and handed the wreckage to the media with both hands. This wasn't transparency, it was sabotage dressed as storytelling. And the public started to notice. What once felt like a necessary reckoning began to feel like revenge. But by then, the damage was done. The royal family had been publicly humiliated, their image gutted, their legacy distorted. And the two people behind it, they were just getting started. Because while the emotional wreckage filled headlines, the financial pressure was quietly building behind the scenes. While the headlines focused on heartbreak and betrayal, something else was crumbling behind the scenes: Harry and Meghan's brand, the one they had spent years building on victimhood, rebellion, and royal fallout. And without a steady stream of outrage to fuel it, the shine began to fade. Fast. The Montecito mansion wasn't just a home, It was a symbol. A $14 million property with towering expenses, private security, landscaping, round-the-clock staff, and all the optics of a high-profile Hollywood life. But none of that comes cheap. And after the Spotify deal collapsed and Netflix began quietly scaling back, so did the couple's financial cushion.
The very thing that royal family should not get involved in.
And this was always the risk, wasn't it? It was always the risk when he was surrounded by trigger-happy lawyers and craven celebrities who are putting lots of ideas into his mind, and he thinks he's going to change the world. And in fact, he'll probably end up in all of these cases looking incredibly stupid, certainly in the case against the government as well.
Meghan's ventures were meant to pick up the slack. A lifestyle brand, product lines, jam jars, and kitchenware with Duchess flair. But instead of going viral, they became punchlines. Every attempt at a reinvention fell flat. From Martha Stewart-style press launches to curated wellness content, nothing stuck. The audience was tired. The story was stale. And that's when things turned desperate. Harry started making calls, not to old friends, but to former contacts inside the UK, courtiers, advisors, anyone who might entertain the idea of a soft return. A way back in, not for family, but for optics. The Sussex brand was floundering, and reconnecting with the royal institution, even symbolically, could be the golden ticket. But it wasn't a reunion. It was a business move. Meghan, meanwhile, stayed in the shadows, focused on repositioning herself as a polished American icon. Graceful, independent, aspirational. She didn't need the crown to come back. She just needed the illusion of access to it. Together, they weren't trying to fix anything. They were trying to relight a fire that had burned out. And with their empire built on drama, there was only one way to stay relevant: stir the pot again. That's when the plan shifted gears. The quiet outreach became coordinated. The silence turned tactical. Because while the public thought the drama was over, Harry and Meghan were preparing for the next act. And the first person to sound the alarm?
Well, against the government too. I mean, because what
He's back now, so clearly he's not too worried.
Well, there is another case against the man, actually, where he claims that they misled the world about his case against the government on protection. What he's really saying is, how dare the Mail accuse him of spin?
Was the one who's never been afraid to expose what the palace won't? Tom Bower. Tom Bower had seen it coming before anyone else. While the press focused on Netflix trailers and Meghan's failed rebrand, he was watching the quiet moves. Phone calls made at odd hours, back-channel messages passed to palace aides, private inquiries disguised as friendly check-ins. But it wasn't curiosity, it was recon. Harry wasn't just testing the waters, he was mapping the terrain. He wanted a way back in, not as a humbled son or a brother seeking forgiveness, but as a rebranded public figure, free to float between royal duty and celebrity freedom. A hybrid role with no precedent, one where he could hold onto royal legitimacy while cashing checks in California. And Bower made one thing brutally clear. This wasn't desperation, it was strategy. A cold, calculated return campaign, co-authored behind the scenes by Meghan, who remained silent in public but active behind the scenes. Together, they were orchestrating something the palace hadn't seen before: a soft siege. No formal request, no apology. Just a growing web of subtle pressure. Interviews timed to stir sympathy, appearances staged for maximum elegance, and private appeals crafted to sound just harmless enough to entertain. But the firm wasn't buying it. What Bower exposed wasn't a reconciliation effort, it was a manipulation campaign. One designed to paint the royal family into a corner.
Well, he doesn't believe in a free press, does he?
He believes the press should be obedient to him. And so what he's doing is, four cases, what he's doing is he's getting himself more and more in depth, in the deep, and mud.
But it sounds like you actually believe that the result of all of this could actually be Harry ending up in real trouble by taking on all of these.
Refuse Harry and Meghan, and they could claim the palace was cold, unyielding, even cruel. Let them back in, and the institution would instantly lose its credibility. Either way, Harry and Meghan had their headline. It was a trap, and the royal family knew it. Behind palace walls, the mood shifted. The idea of a quiet return was dead. This wasn't about making amends, it was about power. And Meghan? She wasn't on the sidelines, she was steering the entire thing. Because at this point, Harry wasn't leading a revenge mission alone. He was following a blueprint. To understand how this plan held together for so long, you have to look at who was really steering it. Meghan wasn't just involved, she was in control. Every move, every message, every media appearance carried her fingerprint. And it became clear. Harry wasn't just acting on instinct. He was executing a larger design. From the very beginning, Meghan positioned herself not as an outsider in distress, but as the architect of a narrative that could shift global opinion. She understood the power of framing, of timing, of turning personal moments into public strategy. And Harry, already wounded by years of unresolved trauma, became both her partner and her pawn. Their interviews weren't spontaneous. Their public statements were never off the cuff. Every appearance, every word was rehearsed, refined, and directed toward one outcome: elevating themselves while diminishing the crown. Harry's transformation didn't happen overnight. It happened through isolation, distance from his family, dependence on Meghan's team, an echo chamber that validated every resentment and rewrote every royal memory as trauma. Suddenly, the brother who once laughed alongside William was now accusing him of violence.
Well, I think what it all shows is that King Charles needs to stand well away from his son, who is being so controversial and becoming so litigant happy that he is dangerous.
The son who once called Charles Pa was painting him as cold and calculated. And all the while, Meghan stayed composed, polished, smiling for cameras while steering the storm from behind the curtain. She knew which strings to pull, which wounds to press, which words would break through the headlines. Even in their rare moments of silence, the message was clear. Meghan was not reacting to events. She was orchestrating them, and Harry? He had crossed the point of no return. What started as a cry for independence had evolved into something far more ruthless, a campaign to reshape the monarchy's legacy, one scandal at a time. But if Meghan thought the palace would sit back forever, she was wrong. Because inside the royal walls, the mood was no longer defensive. It was war-ready. The palace had stayed quiet long enough. But once the betrayals went public, once the Netflix attacks, the Oprah bombs and Spare left nothing sacred, everything changed. William drew the line first. No more meetings, no more messages. Harry hadn't just broken trust, he'd torched it. And Meghan? She wasn't seen as collateral damage. She was seen as the driver. Inside the palace, Harry's name vanished from conversation. Staff who once worked closely with him refused to be involved in anything that bore the Sussex seal. He wasn't just gone, he was erased. Queen Camilla didn't mince words either. After years of rebuilding her image, Spare shattered it in a few carefully chosen lines.
I think clearly against Mirror Group newspapers, they've admitted many times having hacked. So there's against the government, against the Mail on the protection thing, I'm told his case is weak.
Her position was firm. Letting Harry back in would undo everything. And she made that clear to Charles. The public wasn't far behind. Hashtags like Royal Reject or No Way Harry flooded social feeds. Polls showed overwhelming opposition to any kind of return. Sympathy had turned into exhaustion. The firm responded the only way it knows how, with unity, silence, and steel. There would be no part-time deals, no quiet forgiveness, no open doors. And as those doors shut for good, Harry and Meghan were left outside, watching the institution they tried to manipulate move on without them. This wasn't a fallout. It was a war. And while Meghan and Harry may have believed they could rewrite the rules from the outside, the truth is, the crown doesn't bend. Not for love, not for fame, and definitely not for regret. What started as a romantic break from duty turned into a blueprint for destruction. And now, the same institution they tried to weaponize for their own image has turned cold, unmovable, and immune to their narrative. The royal family isn't just surviving this storm, it's rebuilding in spite of it. King Charles is focused on legacy. William and Catherine are solidifying their future roles. Camilla's approval is climbing. The firm is playing the long game, as it always has. But Meghan and Harry? They're watching their empire shrink. The documentaries have stopped trending, the book sales have slowed. Brand deals are stalling. Their name, once a headline magnet, is now a cautionary tale. They tried to cash in on chaos, they tried to market pain. And when that didn't work, they came back, quietly, cautiously, hoping no one would notice. But everyone noticed. Because once you turn your family into content, there's no rewind button. Once you weaponize a crown for clicks, you don't just lose your place in the palace, you lose the trust of a nation. And in a world where perception is everything, that kind of loss isn't temporary. It's permanent.